Welcome to my channel. Today I will be reading from the JustNoMail subreddit, so let's jump into it. The time my mom dropped the mic. This happened when I was about 14 years old. My mom has always been extremely opinionated, so much so that whenever she gets a little excited while telling a story, she will randomly shout certain words in the middle of them. For example, she might be telling a story about going to the grocery store, and halfway through, she suddenly yelled, "Bananas!" then go back to the story like nothing happened. It's really annoying, but you get used to it. One day after school, I come home to find my mom sitting on the stairs leading to the basement crying. I was very worried, because this was the only time I've ever seen her cry. So I ask what's wrong. She tells me that earlier that day she was downstairs folding laundry when she heard a strange noise. She couldn't figure out where it was coming from, so she decided to investigate. As she started to walk down the basement stairs, the noise started to get louder. When she got to the bottom of the stairs, the noise stopped. She thought maybe it was a mouse or something. So she continued to look around until she found the source of the noise. Apparently, it was an extremely large spider that had gotten stuck in the washing machine hose. She screamed and called my dad, who took care of it. I found this whole story absolutely hilarious and told her so. She got even more pissed off and sent me to my room for being disrespectful. She told me to come back out when I learned some manners. I rolled my eyes and went to my room. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I thought maybe my dad was coming to check on me, but I was wrong. It was my mom. She stood in my doorway for a second with the weirdest look on her face. Then she turned around and walked out. That was odd, but I shrugged it off and went back to playing video games. About an hour goes by and I hear my mom scream upstairs, blank, which wasn't any word I'd ever heard her say before. I got up and went to see what was going on. She was standing next to the staircase with that same weird look on her face from before. Then she says to me, "Do you know what this means?" And I replied, "What are you talking about? What happened?" She said, "You know what this means?" Still with that same look on her face. Then she started walking towards me, and as she got closer, I could tell she was smiling underneath her hand. She leaned in and whispered, "This means drop the mic." Then she dropped to her knees and burst out laughing. I was completely confused. But then I realized she was referring to the spider incident and how she had to literally drop the mic after finding the spider. I joined in on her laughter and we had a great time making up silly names for the spider and pretending it was a famous talk show host. We also made up stories about the spider hosting its own late-night talk show from inside the washing machine. To this day, whenever there's a spider in the house, we refer to it as the host. The time my grandpa dropped the mic, all her life, my grandma was known to say the most random things out of nowhere. But towards the end of her life, though, she didn't say much at all. She had a bunch of chronic illnesses, and it just required too much effort. One day, my grandma and I were hanging out in the living room. She was dozing in the rocking chair before suddenly waking up and screaming, "It'll be bloody." Then, she went silent again. I was horrified. A few hours later, I got my first period. Did she somehow predict it? I don't know. All I know is that it was spooky. My dad dropping the mic. Okay, so a bit of context. My dad is a firefighter and my brother is a paramedic. They both work in very high-stress environments and they're both incredibly sarcastic people. So naturally, they get a lot of digs at each other. One day, my brother decides he wants to play a prank on my dad. He puts salt in his water bottle. Now, my dad isn't the type of person to drink straight water. He always adds flavor drops to his water, which conveniently have sugar in them. So when he pours the water into his glass, he noticed the salt and immediately knew what my brother did. He just shook his head and laughed it off. The next day at breakfast, my mom asks my dad how his water tasted, and he starts to explain the situation, leaving out the part about the sugar. My brother piped up and said, "Oh, I'm sure he loved having diabetes for a day. Right, Dad?" Dad just stared at him for a moment. Everyone at the table was silent. Then my dad said, "Well, that was pretty clever, son. Too bad you won't be needing your insulin pump anymore." My brother's eyes widened and he quickly tried to explain that he was joking, but my dad cut him off. We'll talk about that later. After breakfast, my dad called the local fire station and asked if anyone needed an extra set of hands that morning. When he came back, he brought an empty box with him. My brother asked what the box was and Dad said, "Your present." With a smile, he pulled out my brother's insulin pump and detached the tubing. Then he plugged the tubing into the empty box and handed it to my brother. He said, "Here, go ahead and plug in your new pump." My brother was pale. Then he realized the tubing wasn't attached to the wall. Dad just shrugged. "There's no batteries in this one." Brother was speechless. Dad just smiled and said, "Merry Christmas." Let's just say brother never messed with Dad again. The time my sister dropped the mic, This happened a few weeks ago. My older sister, age 26, works in a rather male-dominated field. Her boss is a 55-year-old man who thinks he's funny. Most of the time his jokes are uncomfortable and inappropriate. Last week, during a staff meeting, he decided to make a joke about women in the workplace. Not surprisingly, it was completely sexist and totally inappropriate. My sister, along with everyone else, stared at him awkwardly until he finally realized how stupid his joke was and decided to drop it. After the meeting, my sister got called into his office because apparently he wanted to apologize to her directly for his joke. But really, it was just him trying to save face. He apologized profusely and said he never meant for it to come across that way. Then he said, "I guess I just don't understand why you're so sensitive." My sister, who has always been very passive, was not having it. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "You know what? I'm not sensitive. I'm just not here to listen to your shriveled old man crinkles make fun of half the population." My sister then turned and walked out. People in our family often compare him to Mr. Burns, so she's probably just watching too much Simpsons. That was Just No Mail, and if you liked this content, check out my podcast where I publish the exact same episodes. Also hit that subscribe button because I put out new videos every single day. Thank you for watching and have a good one.